Today's tinkering is accompanied by Wildfire Relief Lager from One Great City Brewing in Winnipeg, Manitoba. As you may have heard in the news, northern Manitoba was devastated by wildfires this summer. Entire communities were evacuated for months at a time, and this beer is donating all of the proceeds to the Canadian Red Cross for their wildlife relief efforts. All the ingredients were donated, the brewing was donated, so majority of the money from this beer is going to help those people out that were out of their homes for months at a time and weren't sure if they were ever to see them again. And while it's not the style of beer I would normally drink, I'm willing to help out that cause absolutely. This isn't the only way I help them out, but you know, it's a little bit that helps. So today I am going to be experimenting with these they call them laser engraving papers or laser engraving foil. They are essentially a water slide decal that is opaque and which will allow the laser to actually etch it. And they are intended to be used on transparent items, which lasers generally can't touch because, it's light. It passes right through. I picked these up off of AliExpress a few months ago, and hopefully they will allow me to put etchings onto bits of glass like this or this. These particular examples are ones that I just picked up at a thrift store to experiment with. So if I screw them up, it's, like 50 cents or 35 cents down the drain. Not a big deal. I'm hoping to come up with some engraving that is similar to what's on the pint glass that I typically use here. It usually shows up a little bit better when I've got a darker beer. But that, I'm not sure if it's a laser engraving or a sandblast etching, but that is kind of the effect that I'm going for. Hopefully a little bit more showy than that. This one is almost 3 years old and has been through the dishwasher at least weekly in all those times, so it may have faded a little bit. But that's what I'm going for, and apparently what I've read is when you're laser etching into glass, you're not actually making a mark on the glass, you are actually creating microfractures in a thin layer of the glass. And to that end, I've also read that if you're not careful, you can blow up the glass or shatter it or whatever. And also, complicating this, different types of glass apparently react differently. So I have no idea what these are. There's no branding on them or anything, but let's just experiment here. This isn't the usual electronics type video that I normally make. It's just makery stuff and following my muse. So with these things came this sheet which explained roughly how to use them. So you cut it down to size. The ones that I got are unfortunately already cut into smaller bits. It's about 10 by 40 millimeters. So that may limit what I'm doing, although maybe I can put multiple pieces together. We'll see. Anyways, it says to cut it, to soak it for a minute or two, because it's a water slide decal. Stick it onto the object, sliding the backing paper out from underneath, squeegee any air bubbles out, and let it dry for a while. That's going to make my experiments take a lot longer than I'd hoped. But anyway, prepare to engrave, start the engrave, and then you soak it off after the engrave and remove any of the excess paper. Seems simple enough. On the back, it has some suggested parameters for a 10 watt CO2 laser, which I don't have. I've got a 60 watt diode laser, so it's going to be completely different. And it changes by color as well. I've got the black, but again, that doesn't matter too much. Down here, there is a QR code that goes to a YouTube video showing how to use it. And that YouTube video is this one from about 2 years ago from Steve Makes Everything. I'm not going to watch it here because I don't want to do nasty YouTube copyright things. I will put a link to it down below, but I'll watch it off camera and then we'll come back. Okay, well, that was interesting. I did a little bit more digging around, and the laser that he was demonstrating with in his video was a 10 watt laser, minus 60 watts, so I'll have to keep that in mind for the power. But I will start some of these guys soaking for a couple of minutes. And the other thing that he suggested was tempera paint. I don't have any of that, but I do have a bit of acrylic paint. So I think I will put some of that onto here as well, just as an experiment. We'll see how that works. Again, this is just an experiment. You never know what's going to happen, but we'll lay some of that down. This is just like cheap craft store, dollar store acrylic paint, so maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. Don't know. That's why we're experimenting. Normally, I don't do a lot of, arts and crafts videos. Occasionally I'll do a maker video or something like that. But during the mailbag, when I was opening these laser transfer sheets or laser engraving sheets, a few people in the comments suggested that they wanted to see if it worked and how well it worked. So that's why we're here today. Let's give this a go. It's been a couple of minutes. Let's see if these things, oh yeah, these want to slide. Okay, so we'll slide those off. And you remember back in your youth when you're making model kits and stuff and putting the decals on? This is essentially that same process. It's a little awkward here, but I'll manage it, I think. I want to get these guys all nudged in, and I kind of like to get them nudged together so that they're touching, so that if we do overlap, or we can even try something larger than just a single one to see how that works. And again, I don't know if this is going to work the way it claims it will, but we'll find out. Let's absorb up any water that's leaching out from under the edges of it, nudge them back together here. And then it's suggested to dry it with a hair dryer. Well, I don't have one of those, but I do have a heat gun. Okay, it's about 10 or 15 minutes later. That paint is mostly dry, except for a couple of bits over in the corner there, but we'll worry about that later. These things are dry and they're stuck down, so let's go over to the laser and just see what we can do with this, I guess. Fire this thing up and see what we can get happening. Now, this is going to be a bit tricky lining it up on there, but we shall see what we can do. Unfortunately, this machine's a bit noisy. I hope you can hear me okay. I've got just a basic graphic figured out for testing. That box is the same size as each of those individual little pieces of pre-cut transfer, so hopefully this should work out. I'm going to start with 100 millimeters per second and 25% power, and we'll go from there. We'll see what happens. Let's see what's happened here. It looks like it's blown right through that, and I didn't have it very well aimed. This one, on the other hand, it doesn't seem to have gone all the way through. Although it does appear to have done something on that side. I wonder if my educated guesses were actually pretty close. I think I'm going to try it a little further up with a little bit higher power, and maybe with a little bit lower power, and see what happens. Let's just come back over here where it's quieter. So it looks like the 3 different power settings that I used seem to have all done something. This one was at 25% power, that one's at 15% power, and that's at 35% power, and the same over here. Looks like the 15% power didn't work so well on the paint, and maybe not on that laser foil or laser transfer stuff, this stuff that we're actually testing here. But 35% made a little bit wider lines. The stuff up on the sides here is going to be less of an accurate test because it's kind of at an angle and it's going to be a little bit out of focus as you get closer to the laser. But down here on the field, I think the 35% worked pretty good. I could probably even bump that up. Down here, well, let's clean this stuff off and see what happens. Hopefully it's just as easy as re-wetting it and getting it to float off again. But we shall see, I guess. Maybe I'll use some alcohol. I don't know. This is going to be a bit of a challenge, but I'll, again, burn through this and return to you when I've got something to show. Okay, there I've got 90% of the stuff cleaned off, and you can't see a damn thing on camera, can you? Well, the only ones that even show a little bit are the one that I did at 35% power, so 35% of 60 watts at 100 millimeters per second, and that is the one with the paint, which actually left more of a mark than the laser foil. Huh, interesting. I think I want to experiment a little bit more. Oh, wait, I just noticed down there. That is the paint at 25% power. And yeah, of the fancy stuff that I bought, it made finer lines, but it's much fainter. So at the same power, I think the paint is the winner. I'm going to experiment a little bit more and see if I can come up with something that works a little bit better. Oh, by the way, for cleaning it off, the water cleaned the paint off just fine. It's a water-based acrylic, that's not a surprise. This stuff, alcohol was my friend and took it off with a little bit of scrubbing. But yeah, I'm going to experiment and well, I think I found the limits of my process here. As you can see, I cracked the plate. That didn't take too long to have a catastrophic failure either. It looks like it broke in the 60% power using the laser engraving paper, tape stuff, whatever, the stuff that I was testing. With 60% power with the paint, or 40% power with the paint at 10 millimeters per second, not the 100 that I was using before, it seemed to come out okay. And actually, I think that 40% looks pretty good. Well, let me scrub the this stuff off. Oh, it made some soot marks too. That's new. So let me just scrub that stuff off, being careful, of course, not to cut myself on the broken glass. And we'll just see what those ones looked like, you know, before the thing shattered. So that didn't clean up as ideally as I would have liked. And the laser engraving marking paper that I was actually testing seems to have left some of itself embedded in the glass, which is less than ideal. But it did make sharper marks than with the paint. These are, this 40% here and this 40% there are done at the same power level and at the same speed. Just this one down here was done with the paint, and this one up here was done with this marking paper that we're testing. Ignore the 50% because it was at the wrong speed, but the 60% down here in paint worked. But then when I was doing this 60% here, it failed. I killed it before it drew the bottom line, but I heard the pop and I hit the emergency stop button shortly after. And I think you can see that the center of the cracking is right in the middle of that line, which is where it was going, and I just stopped it there. So that is not going to work out. And I'm not really thrilled at the idea of the remnants of whatever that sticker material is being left in there. And I scrubbed that fairly hard. I scrubbed that, as hard as I dare anyway, with Q-tips for a while using alcohol. And then I used my nylon scrubby brush here for quite some time. And I was not able to get all that coloration out of there. So, like I said, I'm not really thrilled about that. But the cheap craft paint from the dollar store worked quite well. I think I can definitely work with that. And yes, it is a little bit fuzzier, but even at the 40%, I think I might experiment a little bit and drop the power down a little bit more. But I think that paint is the winner over this this laser marking paper that I bought. And that actually agrees with more or less with what Steve said in that video that I linked to earlier as well. So I think that's probably where I'm going to land. I think I'm going to go and see if I can find a few more of these plates before I start messing with the beer glasses, because the beer glasses are a whole nother level of complication, because I've got to use that rotary attachment in the laser, and that's more experimentation that is kind of beyond the scope of what I wanted to do in this video. I just wanted to see if this stuff works, and it does, but it doesn't work as well as something that is cheap and easily available. So I don't think I'm going to waste money buying more of this stuff. There may be more different brands of it or whatnot. I know Xtool sells some. This apparently isn't Xtools, but because it just came from a random seller on AliExpress. But regardless, it works, but there are things that work better. Experiment concluded. Thanks for watching. Questions and comments down below. Come back next week for your regularly scheduled random electronic stuff that I haven't figured out what I'm going to do yet, but that's what it will be, I'm sure. Thanks for watching. Questions and comments. I think I already said that. Yeah, talk to you later. Bye.